I'm an intimacy coach. So I work with couples. I help couples reignite passion, pleasure, and connect in relationships. But my writing also kind of goes along with it, even though it's fiction. I write a lot about the woman's experience, especially with a little bit of some erotic undertones. So it kind of aligns with what I do full time as an intimacy coach.
Oh, great. So this is something I was going to ask about. So how does being an author help you with your career or business?
It definitely helps. So first of all, too, because I'm a imaginative person. So not only have I experienced things, I've seen a lot and I write about it a lot. When I'm working with my clients, they really feel like I hear them and I understand them. So a lot of times, even in our consultations, they'll tell me like one or two things and I'll either regurgitate, paraphrase, or, kind of give them some advice. And they're just like, how do you know that? How do you know? I feel like you know about me, and I didn't tell you about my life. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I read about it too. So I understand some of the, concerns that people have, especially when it comes to intimacy, physical intimacy, and things like that. So I really feel that writing keeps me in that space. It keeps me focused on what it is that I do with my clients as well. It just keeps me creative. I think you always have to be creative working with people. You have to be willing to accommodate. Be flexible and be willing to be open-minded, which I feel like is very much I exude my writing. Is just an openness, and my goal is to draw my readers in, even if they're like, I would never do that, or that's not my life. But then when like they read it, now they're on the side of the protagonist. They're like, I think I like her, even though I'm not. I don't do that. I'm not like her. I'm not from her same background or anything like that. But I feel like I can connect with her and relate to her. And that really helps in my line of work as well.
Did it ever happen to you that like someone read your book and then became a client or reached out to you?
That's a good question. I don't know now that I think about it, because my clients kind of come from all over, so sometimes they're reaching out to me via social media, or they just found me on Google, they found my website. Maybe they saw me on a podcast or, on like doing a signature talk at an event or something like that. So I don't know if I've ever had anyone that said, I read your book first and then I became a client. I think lately it's been the other way around. Like, they're clients and they're like, oh, I got to read this book. So I'm going to have to ask that. I'll have to like send out an email and take like a poll. Like, I wonder, have you all read this book first before? Because I think that a lot of times when they hire me to work with them, they're so focused on getting help in that area that's the focus. So they're not really asking about, the books or any other products on my site. They're just like, Angie, can you help me? Just help me. So
I see. So it looks like it has been quite a journey. You like, as far as I understand, before you started working as a coach, like when you were writing your first and second book, you were still working a day job. Tell me how this transition happened.
yes, so that is so true. While I was writing both of the books that are out now, I was working a full-time job. So I wasn't a full-time entrepreneur like I am now. But at the time, when I wrote my first book, I was actually working a part-time job. So I had a little bit of flexibility because I was only working like 3 days a week, 6 hours a day. But I'm also married and I have kids. So I mean, it was still like a full schedule. But and then when I started my second book, I was still working part time, and then I ended up taking a full time job while I was writing the book. And the reason why I did that at the time was financially, for a lot of people who understand writing, and if this is something that you're very serious about as a career, it's not one of those things you just start writing and you make billions of dollars like you're J.K. Rowling, so you have to you have to find other ways to kind of fund your business goals. And so for me, because my background was in mental health, I was working as a school social worker because the hours were a lot more flexible in terms of, and I don't even want to say flexible, it was pretty much the same schedule, but I knew that I was going to work at 7:30 a.m. and getting off at 4 for the most part every day. So that still left, a good portion of the day afterwards, and then also my weekends, and then like different breaks off, like summer, fall breaks, and things like that. So it gave me an opportunity to write in between that time. But I really had to be extremely disciplined because still, in order for that to work, you have to kind of put yourself on a schedule and say, okay, every day I'm going to write at this time for this many hours, or however, or you're going to say, like, I'll write so many pages a day. And I used to keep it like on my calendar, like literally, I would say, I'm down to crunch time. It's like 3, 4 months before I want this first draft to be done. So I need to write this many pages each day for the next 30 days or the next 60 days. So that's really how I was able to do it while I was working a full-time job, because again, you kind of still need to be able to pay your bills. And so that's important as well. And then too, because I needed to invest in the book, I needed to invest in, again, like hiring editors. That's not something that's going to cost like $2. That's a very extensive job. And it's well worth it. So I don't regret that at all, but I needed to be able to pay for that. Needed to be able to pay for someone to design my book cover, and someone to help with, like, even with the marketing, I was doing it myself for the most part. But, you have to set up your mailing list, and, whether that's MailChimp or Constant Contact, you have to pay for that membership. Or if you're making flyers, if you're going to do like a book signing or a launch, so there's a lot of different expenses that goes into that. And I really, really value my full-time job at the time to help me to be able to do that.
So would you say it paid off? Because your book then became an Amazon bestseller. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, and that surprised me because I had heard about that before. Like, I'm a reader, so I've seen like Amazon bestseller tags on things and stuff. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. I just didn't think that would be something that, I guess it was never a goal. Let me say it like this. It wasn't a goal. My goal was just like, if I could like break even the investment that I made, and get this book out there, that's what I'm happy about, my starting point. But I didn't realize that, I think too, some of the categories that my book was listed in, especially in some smaller categories, it was a little bit easier for me to reach that goal because I was promoting the heck out of this book for months. Like I was like, giving out excerpts. I was, if you sign up for my mailing list, I would give out the first chapter for free just to kind of like, a teaser. And so I was really doing that for a long time. So by the time the launch happened, by the time the book actually launched, people were ready. They were ready. Like, I pre-ordered, or, I'm buying it that day. And because so many people purchased in a short amount of time on Amazon that day, it shot up, on the list. And I think I was at like literally like number one, maybe for like 3 days straight in that particular category. Now, after that, because you got to maintain that, but it was nice to be able to reach that status. So that was really cool. That was really cool. And I definitely encourage a lot of new writers, just like myself, if you're just starting out. And that's something that's interesting to you. That's a good way to go about doing it.
So tell us a little bit about the numbers. How big was your mailing list, and how long did it take you to build a mailing list before you launched? And like how much did you make on the first, like in book sales in the end, or the first?
So I would say the first book, because I started building the mailing list before I even wrote the first book. And that's something that's really important to do. Like, 'cause a lot of times people think like, okay, I tell a couple of people I'm writing a book, and then when it comes out, everybody's just going to buy it, and it doesn't exactly work that way. It's really like the slow build. And so even though I published my first book in November of 2018, I started building the mailing list in April of 2017. So I was building the list for well over a year, like a year and a half. And I started out on social media platforms because, I mean, it's not free, technically, you're not really paying like this monthly fee, but you are paying in your time and them getting information from you. But I utilize those platforms to start out and just tell people, yeah, like, hey, I'm writing a book, because that was new for a lot of people. They were looking at me like, we don't know you as an author, so what are you talking about? So I had to really kind of like sell myself in a sense and get them to understand that I really am a writer, and so that takes a while. People have to see a message, over and over again for it to kind of like stick. And so I would say I started building the mailing list in April of 2017. The first book did pretty well, but the launch was not as big as the second book because again, I was a new author. So I would say on the first day of the first book, I might have sold 60 copies, which was really good for like a new author. Like I had like absolutely like no following, and I'm just like, trying to build it up. And I think by that time my mailing list was like maybe at 300 or 400 people, which was still pretty good to sell that many books in one day. So I was really happy. I mean, I was just like ecstatic. By the time I released my second book, that was December of 2020. So that was 2 years later. And by that time, my mailing list was almost at 2,000. This is all through organic reach. So just talking to people about it, sharing information, telling them to sign up for the mailing list. So I didn't purchase any lists. I didn't, solicit or try to steal people's email addresses. Like I was so not with that because I don't like when people do that to me. I end up on mailing lists and I'm like, I know I didn't give you my email. So I would say definitely from around 300 to 400, my first book. And then 2 years later, I was closer to 2,000 subscribers on the email list. I can't recall social media followers at that time. That part I didn't really, I won't say I won't pay attention to it kind of, because I was like, I really want to reach the people that really want to buy the book. And sometimes that's kind of hard to tell with social media. When the second book came out on that first day, I definitely sold in the hundreds. Um, I don't recall which hundred we're talking about, maybe 300 or something like, but it was so quick. It happened in a short amount of time, which is how I hit that list, was because when you're selling books and like even within an hour, if you sell so many books in comparison to other, books that come out that same day in that genre, if you're the top one, you become that bestseller in that category. So that's how that happened. So that's why I said I knew nothing about that stuff. It just happened. I was like, oh, And so I ended up learning about that. And I was like, oh, now I understand it. Let me try to do that, maybe when the next book comes out. So yeah, so that's pretty much where I was at. And then over time, I've definitely sold more books. I've been on different platforms where I've offered some discounts on the books. One time in like a week, I was doing a special on a platform called BookBub. I ended up selling over 500 books in like a week, and so that was really good because the book had already been out for like well over a year, and it was able to sell like that still. So a lot of times it's about, repackaging it. Sometimes it's rebranding, and doing a relaunch sometimes too, and that can really help with continuous sales of your book too.
And how did you go about the pricing?
Well, again, comparison. I just looked at a lot of books that were kind of in similar categories, similar, not so much similar titles, but within like the genre and the amount of pages too that my book had. So because I write novels, both of my books were around little over 200 pages, roughly like around 13 chapters. So I looked at other books that were kind of like within that realm. And then that's how I kind of came up with the pricing. So my paperback was $17.99 at the time of the launch, and the ebook was $8.99. So like 50%, half of that. So that's how I ended up pricing my book that way. And sometimes I may do a sale where I do another half off of that price, maybe like Black Friday sales and things like that. But for the main, the base price, like $17.99. For the paperback. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it looks like you had a lot of success financially with your book, but I also heard that you won an award on TV for like how did that happen?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think, how did I come across this platform? But it's called Black Authors Matter TV, and they are based in, I feel like I want to say Georgia, like it's a southern state. And I was just happened to see something from them. I don't know if I was following them on social media or I saw an email. And I was like, oh, this is interesting.
When was it? Was it like a year after you launched your second book, or like when was it in terms of?
Yep. So the second book launched in December of 2020, and I won that award last May. So May of 2022. So that was almost about like almost 2 years later. So about almost 2 years later. So yep. So I happened to connect with this platform. I just thought they were really interesting. I really liked the interviews that they were doing with other Black authors. Reached out to them and just said, hey, my name is Angie. I'm an author as well. Love your platform. And they were like, great. Would you like to do an interview? I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm not usually turning down interviews because I'm just like, it's so nice to be able to just talk about what I do and meet other people. But little did I know, I didn't know that when I did that interview, I think it was at the top of 2022. So like around January, it was on social media platforms and things like that, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I was just talking about the book. So I was just doing what I naturally do all the time. They submitted a Black Authors Matters t-shirt. And so when I was on the interview, I got a chance to wear the t-shirt and just kind of represent the platform, but talk about my book. But little did I know that they actually had people that judge the authors, like on the interviews. Like, I just thought that was so cool. So I literally woke up one day to an email in April, either like late March or early April of 2022, saying you have been nominated for a book award. And I was just like, I've seen emails with stuff like that. So I was just like, okay, I don't know. I don't know how real this is, but then I kept looking at it. Then I sent an email back there like, yes, we judge a lot of our interviews that we have with authors. And there were like, we have a panel, like they have like a large panel across the US of people that judge on these interviews. And just so happened, I was nominated because I was judged by like 900 something like people. And I'm just like, wow, like I'll take it. You know what I'm saying? I'll take it. So basically, after that, they were just like, we're going to be doing an award ceremony, and we'll announce the winner. In the meantime, feel free to let your following know, and people can vote on you as well, and things like that. We also have a panel of judges, but then we're going to take the public, votes as well. And so I just let people know. I just did like a countdown, like, hey, in May we're gonna, learn about the winners. Join me. And then, sometimes I like to just kind of give out little freebies of things. So I'm like, reminding people, if you sign up for my mailing list, you can get the first full chapter of my book for people that didn't know at the time. So I just kind of did that again, almost like that rebranding, relaunching type of thing. Yeah. And I just did that. And a lot of people clearly voted. And I went to the awards ceremony online and I was announced the winner in that category. So it was really exciting. So that was my first book award after getting my book edited and working with Right My Wrongs in 2019. I think we started working together in 2019. The book published in 2020 won a book award in 2022. Yeah. So, and it was for that book. So yeah, it was amazing.
Great. And then if you compare your first book and launch and then like the second one, what were the main learnings that like helped you with your second book? Yeah, and how was the process of publishing different?
Yeah, this was it was a very different experience because again, the first one I was very new to it. I was still learning the ropes. I mean, I'd gone to like some writing workshops and things like that just to kind of get in the world of really publishing a book because I didn't know really anything about it. I didn't know much about traditional versus self-publishing and all of those types of things. But when I worked with Right My Wrongs, what was really helpful was not only were there plenty of editors on staff, so there were like 3 or 4 different editors working on my one book, which I really appreciated because you have like all these different eyes on your book. So you can really kind of catch things that sometimes that one person looking at, it gets to be overwhelming. Like no human can possibly catch everything, all of the loopholes and the mistakes and things like that. So it's really nice to have someone that works on character development, someone that's helping you with setting and the descriptions of, the places and can people feel what you're talking about in the book. And then you have the people that are working on specific like grammatical errors, sentence structure and things like that, inconsistencies in the story. So I learned so much through that because I'm technically not an editor. Like I'm an author. I come up with the story and everything, but when it comes to editing, that's not exactly my strong suit. So I really learned a lot more about editing through working with Right My Wrongs because the feedback that was constantly given to me, I was learning through the feedback. So now when I write with a little bit more of an editing style now. Before I didn't know anything about that. So that process was great. It was almost like going to school at the same time, so so I'm very appreciative of, working with Right My Wrongs on the process because it helped me grow as an author as well.
Are you writing a third book now?
I am. So I'm writing a sequel right now to that second book. So I am definitely looking forward to connecting back with you guys on the editing on that because I was very, very impressed. I got a lot of great feedback just from people who are writers as well, authors as well, because they're reading it from that standpoint too. So when they're reading my book, they can definitely tell, like, yeah, this is some solid editing that's been done on this book. So I will definitely be returning once this book, the first draft, is done.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. Okay, so and what are you most proud of about your book?
Oh, what I'm most proud of. You know what I'm most proud of? I really love when people read it and they see themselves, like to the point that they're like, "Are you in my head? Like, are you in my head? Are you in my home? How do you know this stuff? Like, this is my life. Are you sure you're not spying on me?" So I really appreciate that. I love the invites to people's book clubs, to be a featured author. I've gotten that before too, where they're so excited to have read the book and then they get in contact with me and they're like, "Hey, we have a book club meeting. We're reading something new. We wanted to see if the author can, make an appearance, or whether it's on Zoom or in person." And so I really appreciate that. So I love doing that as well. I love really connecting with the readers on an intimate level. I would definitely say too, I love to hear when people say they've read like the book in like a day or two. I'm like, ooh, I love it, because they're just so drawn to it and they can't put it down. So yeah, I would say those are like the biggest things for me. And of course, it is nice to see the success of it financially because at the end of the day, it's still a business, and you want to be able to make money from your book. And it's nice to be able to go back and see that your book is still selling. You may not always sell like how the launch was, the first day or first week, even the first month, but it is nice to be able to, log in and see your residuals, and so that's a good feeling, and to know that it's self-published. So I pretty much did this by myself. I don't have a traditional publisher. I didn't have, any kind of financial backing. There's a lot of things that I put into it myself. But thankfully it worked out, and getting that book award, I mean, really, it kind of solidified. And I was really appreciative of the acknowledgement because that is one thing I was not expecting. So I do appreciate, being acknowledged in this field, a part of the team of authors. And just recently, I was a part of a photo shoot, historic photo shoot with other Black authors in the city of Chicago. So that was really nice. So it's just things like that that makes it all worthwhile.
Well, as you started speaking about traditional publishing, did you ever consider going that route? Did you ever try speaking to literary agents, or maybe you got anybody reaching out now when you're an established author?
Yeah, actually, for my first book, I ended up going to a writers' conference that was in Chicago downtown, where a lot of the literary agents kind of congregate and they meet up, and then other authors as well. So it gave me a chance to kind of be a part of that network, to meet people, to really understand the traditional publishing process. Because again, I had no idea. I was so new to all of this, but I was so willing to learn. So when I went to that conference, I learned a lot about the process. I even submitted like the first chapter of my first book to some literary agents on site. And it was one of them that was actually interested. It was like about 3 agents that were interested, but one really was interested. She took my first chapter and kind of, did some edits and gave some feedback and asked me if I was open to, kind of this process, if I was open to some of her feedback that she provided. She would like to see if we could possibly work together. So I was excited about that. I submitted it. We had a couple of conversations and then I just didn't hear from her anymore. And I did notice that, they were telling us in the writers conference that the process can be a little, grueling and it's long. Sometimes it can be long. Sometimes it can be quick. You can luck out and meet someone and then you all just, sign your contract and you're ready to go, and finding a publishing house to take on your book. But that didn't happen for me. But because I'm an entrepreneur through and through, like that's very important to me, to kind of be a part of that process, really be spearheading that process, I was more comfortable with self-publishing at the time. I really was, because I really wanted to understand the entire process from A to Z. And I felt like self-publishing was going to help me learn that. So now if I pursue traditional publishing, I have a better sense of how it works. I also know what I want, and what I'm willing to stand on, and what I'm willing to compromise on. And so that's really helpful too. I think in this next part of my journey, if I choose to go that route, I feel like I have a lot more experience in that area.
Great. Great. And then as a closing note, do you have any advice to new authors or people who are just considering this as a path or as a side income?
I would say, the best advice I tend to always give is just start writing, because a lot of times people will ask, like, oh, I want to publish a book, and Angie, how do I do this and do that? And I'm like, well, have you started writing yet? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, that's where you want to start. Like we could get to all the other stuff, but you need material. You need a manuscript. You need ideas down on paper. Don't try to edit it, all at one time. Don't try to stop and be like, okay, I got to fix it. Just like vomit it, just get it all out, whether it's on paper or, your computer, your phone, wherever you're keeping it. And I would also advise, try to keep, copies of whatever you're writing, like in 2, 3, 4 different places if you can, just in case if your computer crashes, something happens, you always have, a backup. So sometimes, a lot of times I'll type on Google Docs, but then I'll also type in Pages on my Mac computer. I'll also save it as a PDF and put it in a file, so I'm just like, I have it in a lot of different places. So just in case if something gets lost, but again, just write, become comfortable with writing and become comfortable with reading, really fall in love with reading. And so that you can get an idea of how sentence structure goes, like how it sounds, especially if you're writing fiction, the conversations, the descriptions, the scene changes in a sense, and all of those different things. So that's the biggest thing, because all of that other stuff you can literally Google and find out step by step what I should be doing, but focus on becoming a great writer. Just write. So that would be my advice.
Oh, a question I think I didn't ask. Did you consider writing a business book that wouldn't be fiction? Or what's your perspective?
That's a good question. So this is a funny part. I don't know how I forgot this, but the funny part about this whole story of me writing is I was approached to ghostwrite a book. And so I did ghostwrite a book recently, like literally just finished it about a month and a half ago. And my client is new to writing as well. So obviously she doesn't really have the time and different things like that. But she had a lot of great ideas. And she was just like, I need someone to put it all together and just write it. So I would love for you to write it, because your writing style and, what you write about is very reminiscent of kind of what I want to do. And so that's how we connected. And she said, Angie, why don't you just like consult? Like, I would love, because I'm new to this and you're really helping me understand the process from the beginning to the end. Like, she was like, I don't know about all these book covers and a spine. I need to have this on the spine, and like how to market this, and blah, 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 So so that was really cool. I did not take her up on that offer as of right now, just because I have a lot on my plate. But it is something that I've been considering in terms of like just educating people about the process, at least if you're self-publishing, because that's the world that I'm in. I can't really speak as strongly to traditional publishing because I haven't had that experience. But as a self-publisher, yes, I'm definitely considering, writing something or even becoming a consultant in that area to help people through that process and learn how to do it. So.
No, I actually meant more like a book related to the intimacy counseling.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sitting up here just going off of So, that's interesting too. And that is something that I've been asked often. And I do believe organically it will happen. I really do. I don't have a necessary like plan, like right now, to put out, a book regarding intimacy between couples, like a nonfiction book. But I really believe eventually it's just going to happen regardless, because it's just like natural, progression of what I do. So